Have you ever noticed how easy it is for people to hand you their labels, their judgments, their expectations, like little boxes they expect you to climb into and stay there forever? From the time you were young, you were probably told who you were and who you should be. Maybe it was parents who projected their unfulfilled dreams onto you, telling you what success was supposed to look like. Maybe it was teachers who decided your worth based on grades, or peers who made you feel like you had to fit a mold to be accepted. Even as an adult, there's no shortage of people who will happily measure your value with their own limited yardstick. They will tell you that you're too quiet or too loud, too ambitious or too complacent, too emotional or too detached, as if their perception were the ultimate truth about you. But here's the thing. No one lives inside your skin but you. No one else knows the battles you've fought or the mountains you've climbed just to stand here today. At some point, you have to look around at all these labels and decide you won't carry them anymore, because the longer you let other people define you, the more you abandon the most important relationship you have, the one with yourself. You start to shrink to fit other people's expectations. You water down your brilliance so no one feels threatened by it. You apologize for your dreams because someone else thinks they're too big or too unrealistic. And every time you do this, you chip away at your own sense of self. There is a quiet tragedy in living a life that is not your own, waking up each day and feeling that hollow ache that you are performing a version of yourself to please others, smiling when you don't feel like it, agreeing when your heart says no, following a path that drains your spirit because you don't want to disappoint or be judged. You think, maybe if I'm good enough, quiet enough, accommodating enough, they will finally accept me. But you don't realize that every time you betray your truth, you are the one rejecting yourself. And no amount of external validation can fill the emptiness that grows when you abandon who you are. No one gets to define you, not your family, not your friends, not your critics, not society. Their opinions are just that, opinions. They are not your destiny. They are not the final word on your worth. You are the only one who can stand in the mirror and say with conviction, "This is who I am. I am not perfect, but I am real. I am not flawless, but I am worthy. I am not here to meet everyone's expectations. I am here to live fully, honestly, and on my own terms." This is what true freedom feels like. The day you stop seeking permission to be yourself is the day you take your power back. You stop explaining your choices to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop defending your dreams to those who have never dared to dream for themselves. You stop compromising your values to make other people comfortable. You start trusting your own voice more than the noise around you. It is not arrogant to define yourself. It is necessary, because if you don't, someone else will. And they will do it to serve their own comfort, not your growth. They will shrink you down to the version of you that makes sense to them, even if it means stripping away your complexity, your potential, your truth. You are allowed to be many things, soft and strong, ambitious and content, confident and humble. You are allowed to change your mind, evolve your beliefs, and outgrow environments that no longer honor your becoming. You don't have to stay small just because it makes other people feel safe. When you finally release the need to be defined by others, you will feel a strange, powerful relief. You will realize you have spent years negotiating your worth as if someone else had the right to approve your existence. But they don't. You were born worthy. You were born enough. You were born with a voice and a purpose that is entirely your own. And every time you choose yourself, every time you honor what feels true for you, you reinforce the most important truth there is. You matter, exactly as you are. This doesn't mean you won't still hear other people's voices trying to creep back in. You will. You will hear the echoes of their doubt when you start to do something bold. You will hear their criticism in the back of your mind when you dare to step outside the lines they drew for you. That's normal, but you don't have to let those voices drive your life. You can notice them, acknowledge them, and still choose your own direction. You can say, "I hear you, and I am doing it my way anyway." The most meaningful journey you will ever take is the journey back to yourself, back to the parts you were told were too much, too strange, too inconvenient. Those are usually the most beautiful parts of you, the ones that hold your originality, your power, your depth. When you reclaim them, you become whole again. You remember that you are not here to play a role in someone else's story. You are here to write your own. So if you have been waiting for permission to be fully yourself, this is it. If you have been waiting for someone to tell you it's okay to let go of all the expectations and labels, this is that moment. You don't have to carry what doesn't belong to you anymore. You don't have to keep apologizing for who you are. You don't have to be smaller, quieter, or safer to fit into spaces that were never meant for your spirit. You get to define yourself. You get to decide what matters to you, what you stand for, and how you will live. You get to choose the relationships, work, and environments that honor your values and nourish your heart. You get to walk away from anything that asks you to betray yourself, and you get to do it unapologetically, without explanation. No one gets to define you but you. That is your birthright. That is your responsibility. And that is your greatest liberation. It takes tremendous courage to unlearn who the world told you to be and step into the person you truly are. For most of us, by the time we realize we've been defined by others, years, sometimes decades, have passed. We've been boxed into identities we didn't consciously choose. The obedient child, the people pleaser, the high achiever, the quiet one, the fixer, the dependable one, the strong one who never breaks. These labels become cages, and what's worse, we start to believe them. We perform them. We shape our lives around them as though they are facts, when in truth they are just repeated impressions filtered through someone else's lens. But identity isn't something you're given. It's something you claim. It's something you define and redefine as you grow. The moment you start questioning, is this really who I am, or who I was taught to be? That's the moment you begin to awaken, because who you are is not a fixed label. It's a living, evolving truth. And no one, not your family, not your past, not society, gets the final say in who you become. Let's be honest. People love predictability. They feel safer when you remain in the version of you they're familiar with. The moment you start stepping out of character, saying no instead of yes, asking for what you need instead of suffering in silence, expressing your authentic desires instead of playing small, you threaten their comfort zone. And when people's comfort is threatened, they react. Some will try to guilt you, others will criticize or mock you. They'll say, "You've changed." And here's what they don't understand. That's the point. You were never meant to stay the same. Growth requires change. Becoming your truest self means shedding the layers that were never really you to begin with. It means acknowledging the roles you played for survival, but also recognizing when they've outlived their purpose. Just because something protected you in the past doesn't mean it belongs in your future. The identity you wore at 15 or 25 or even last year might not fit the person you are becoming now. The process of defining yourself begins in silence. It begins when you unplug from the noise, the opinions, the social media comparisons, the pressure to measure up, and start listening inward. You ask yourself the hard questions: who am I when no one is watching? What do I value, not because I was told to, but because I feel it deep in my bones? What do I want, even if it makes others uncomfortable? These questions can feel scary because the answers might shake up everything you've built your life around. But what's scarier is living an entire life without ever truly meeting yourself. It's far more dangerous to let the world decide who you are than it is to lose people who only loved your mask. Here's something no one teaches us in school. Authenticity isn't always rewarded immediately. Sometimes when you start defining yourself, you will lose people, not because you did something wrong, but because your clarity exposes their confusion. Your self-trust challenges their dependence on outside validation. Your peace disrupts the chaos they are used to, but this is part of the journey. Shedding isn't loss, it's making room. When you let go of what is false, you create space for what is real. And what's real? Real is when you say what you mean and mean what you say. Real is when your actions align with your values, not with someone else's approval. Real is when you walk into a room and don't feel the need to shrink or exaggerate who you are. Real is when you can sit with yourself in quiet and feel proud of how you're showing up, not perfect, but honest. There will always be people who try to put you in a box. Some will do it out of ignorance, some out of fear, others out of jealousy. That's not your problem. Your only job is to refuse to step into it. You're not required to play along. You're not obligated to prove yourself. You're not on this earth to meet anyone's definition but your own. And the moment you internalize that, something powerful happens. You stop chasing validation like a dog chasing cars. You stop apologizing for being too much or not enough. You start taking up space, not with arrogance, but with grounded certainty. You start making decisions not based on how they'll be received, but how aligned they are with your core truth. That's the kind of power no one can take from you. Of course, this doesn't mean you become closed off to feedback or resistant to growth. Quite the opposite. When you know who you are, you can evolve without losing yourself. You can hear feedback and filter it, take what helps and discard what doesn't. You no longer see criticism as a verdict on your worth, but as information. You no longer need applause to feel worthy because you already belong to yourself. So, what does it look like to define yourself practically? It looks like setting boundaries, even when people don't like it. It looks like saying no to the job that pays well but kills your spirit. It looks like ending the relationship that requires you to abandon parts of yourself to keep the peace. It looks like dressing in a way that reflects who you are, not what's trending. It looks like speaking your truth in rooms that are used to your silence. And it also looks like grace, giving yourself permission to change, to mess up, to evolve, to learn, to not have it all figured out, but to keep showing up as honestly as you can. Defining yourself isn't a one-time declaration, it's a daily decision, a commitment to live in alignment with what's real for you. The more you define yourself, the more magnetic you become, not because everyone will like you, they won't, but because the people who are meant for you will find you, the right friends, the right opportunities, the right environments. When you stop performing, you make space for connection rooted in truth, not pretense. So today, ask yourself, what parts of me are real and what parts are performance? Where am I letting someone else's opinion dictate my choices? What would it look like to fully belong to myself? You don't need anyone's permission to start. You don't need a perfect plan or the right words. You just need the willingness to stop abandoning yourself for acceptance, because the cost of that acceptance is too high. It's your soul. Let them say you've changed. Let them say you're different. Let them misunderstand. You are not here to be defined. You are here to define, and that is a right no one can take from you. The moment you reclaim the right to define yourself, you will notice something profound. Every part of your life starts to shift. You'll look around and realize that many of the relationships, habits, and environments you once tolerated no longer fit. This isn't because you suddenly became ungrateful or arrogant. It's because you started to see clearly. Clarity changes everything. It pulls away the veil of pretense and reveals what truly nourishes you and what quietly drains you. For years, you might have shaped your identity around who you needed to be for other people. You became the version of yourself that kept the peace, earned the praise, or avoided conflict. You smiled when you were hurt. You agreed when you disagreed. You showed up for everyone, even when you were exhausted. You wore masks so convincingly that you forgot there was a real face underneath. But when you begin to redefine yourself on your own terms, you start peeling those masks away one by one. And this process, while liberating, can also be disorienting, because it forces you to confront a difficult question. Who am I when I'm no longer performing? Some people never pause to ask this question. They are too busy staying busy. They confuse motion with purpose, productivity with meaning. But eventually, a moment comes, sometimes in the form of burnout, sometimes heartbreak, sometimes an unexpected loss, when you realize that all the success, approval, and external validation you chased didn't fill the emptiness inside. That emptiness is not because you failed to achieve enough. It's because you failed to claim ownership of your own identity. The day you stop living by borrowed definitions is the day you start experiencing a deeper freedom than you ever thought possible. Suddenly, you don't feel obligated to explain yourself to everyone. You don't rush to defend your choices to those who never cared to understand them. You don't shrink your dreams to make others comfortable. You no longer see your sensitivity as weakness, your ambition as arrogance, your boundaries as selfishness. You see them as sacred parts of who you are. And here's the paradox. The more authentic you become, the less you care about convincing people of your worth. You don't have time to manage their projections anymore. You're too busy building a life that feels right to you. Let's talk about how this transformation affects your relationships. When you define yourself, you disrupt old dynamics. The friend who was used to you, always saying yes, may feel offended when you start saying no. The partner who counted on your silence may feel threatened when you start voicing your needs. The colleagues who relied on your people-pleasing may resent your boundaries. This doesn't mean you are wrong for evolving. It means you are finally refusing to abandon yourself for the sake of harmony. Some relationships will grow stronger when you step into your truth, because authenticity inspires authenticity. The people who truly love you will adapt. They might need time to adjust, but ultimately they will respect your growth. Others, however, will fall away. And that is not only okay, but necessary, because any connection that depends on you being less than yourself is not a connection worth keeping. You will also start to notice how redefining yourself changes your work. Perhaps you'll realize you've been in a job that felt safe but unfulfilling. You might see how you compromised your creativity or integrity to fit someone else's expectations. As you gain clarity, you'll feel an urgency to align your work with your values. That doesn't always mean quitting immediately, but it does mean you begin to make choices that honor your true calling. You stop staying small out of fear. You start exploring paths that light you up, even if they don't make sense to anyone else. This is the essence of self-definition. It is not a static declaration, but a dynamic process of becoming. Every decision becomes an opportunity to practice alignment. Every day you ask yourself, does this reflect who I really am? Is this choice coming from fear or from truth? The more you practice, the more you trust yourself. Self-trust is one of the rarest and most powerful forms of confidence. It doesn't mean you always get everything right. It means you know you can handle whatever happens. It means you would rather fail being yourself than succeed by being a stranger to your own soul. And this is where your sense of purpose is reborn. Purpose is not something you stumble upon like a hidden treasure. It's something you create by living in integrity with who you are. It doesn't have to be flashy or world-changing. Purpose can be quiet. It can look like showing up fully for your family, like creating art that speaks to your spirit, like building a business that reflects your values. What matters is that it is real to you. When you define yourself, you also redefine what success means. Success stops being about status or money or recognition alone. It becomes about wholeness, about waking up in the morning and feeling proud of how you are living, about going to bed knowing you didn't betray yourself for approval. That is the kind of success no one can take from you. And here's the secret. When you live this way, you naturally inspire others. You give them silent permission to do the same. You become a living example of what it looks like to be free, not perfect, not without doubts or struggles, but free from the prison of other people's expectations. So if you find yourself in a season of redefining who you are, know this: it is okay to feel uncertain. It is okay to grieve old identities and relationships. It is okay to be both excited and afraid. This is sacred work, and you don't have to rush it. Give yourself the grace to experiment, to try new things, to set new boundaries, to reclaim old parts of yourself you once buried to fit in. You don't need to justify this process to anyone. You only need to honor it for yourself. The people who matter will respect your evolution. The ones who don't were never truly invested in the real you. Let them go. Let yourself grow. And remember, no one gets to define you but you. When you finally step into the truth of defining yourself, you will almost certainly feel resistance, not only from the people around you, but from within your own mind. This is natural. You have spent years, perhaps decades, being shaped by other people's ideas of who you should be. Even when those definitions were unspoken, they were powerful. Sometimes the loudest voices are the ones you internalized long ago. The critical parent who made you feel small, the teacher who doubted your abilities, the partner who said you weren't enough. Now, as you begin to dismantle these old stories, it can feel like you're tearing down the walls of a house you've always lived in. A house that never felt quite right, but at least was familiar. That's why the first stage of reclaiming your self-definition is often marked by discomfort and confusion. You may question whether you're being selfish or unreasonable. You may fear that standing in your truth will cost you love or acceptance. These doubts are understandable, but they do not have to guide your decisions. To stay grounded through this process, you must learn to sit with the discomfort of change. You must remind yourself that growth often feels like loss because you are shedding versions of yourself that no longer fit. The discomfort isn't proof you're making a mistake. It's proof you're doing something brave. One of the biggest challenges during this period is the urge to backtrack. You might set a boundary and then immediately feel guilty. You might express an opinion and then second-guess yourself. You might feel the tension in a relationship after you've stopped playing your old role and be tempted to slip back into people-pleasing just to keep the peace. This is where self-compassion becomes your anchor. Tell yourself, it's okay that this feels hard. It's okay that I'm not sure how people will react. It's okay that part of me still wants to be liked. But I will not abandon myself just to avoid discomfort. Staying committed to your new identity requires practice. You will have to reaffirm your truth again and again, sometimes in the face of judgment or misunderstanding. You will have to be willing to disappoint people. You will have to be willing to let go of relationships that depend on your compliance. You will have to be willing to choose your integrity over your image. This is why clarity matters so much. When you know who you are and what you stand for, you have something solid to return to whenever doubt arises. Clarity is like a lighthouse. It guides you through the fog. It reminds you why you started this journey in the first place. Ask yourself regularly, what do I value? What do I need? What do I believe about myself? Write your answers down. Revisit them when you feel shaky. These simple reflections can keep you tethered to your purpose when the world tries to pull you back into old patterns. You will also notice that redefining yourself changes how you respond to criticism. When you were living by other people's definitions, criticism could feel like an existential threat. Any hint of disapproval was evidence you were failing. Now, criticism becomes information. Sometimes it is useful, feedback you can consider with curiosity. Other times, it is simply projection. Either way, it no longer has the power to unravel you. You realize that other people's opinions are not your responsibility to manage. You don't have to convince everyone to agree with your choices. You don't have to shrink yourself to fit their comfort zones. You don't have to explain your path to those who were never meant to walk it with you. This freedom is uncomfortable at first, but over time it becomes exhilarating. You discover how much energy you have when you stop performing. You feel lighter without the burden of constant self-editing. You find more authentic connections, people who appreciate you without requiring you to be someone you're not. Of course, there will still be days when old insecurities surface. You might have moments of doubt, loneliness, or longing for the ease of your former life. You might miss the predictable approval you used to get by following the script. When this happens, remind yourself, comfort is not the same as fulfillment. Familiarity is not the same as freedom. You didn't start this journey to feel safe. You started it to feel alive. And the truth is, you are not as alone as you think. Many people are secretly longing to live more honestly, but are afraid to take the first step. When you embody your truth, you give them silent permission to do the same. You become an example that authenticity is possible, that you can lose the old life and survive and even thrive in the new one. You may also find that as you evolve, your dreams evolve too. You will outgrow certain goals, ambitions, or environments that once mattered deeply to you. This doesn't mean you were wrong to pursue them. It simply means you have new information about who you are and what you want. Give yourself permission to pivot without shame. It is a sign of growth to change direction when your soul requires it. Another important part of staying grounded is creating daily practices that connect you to yourself. This could be journaling, meditation, spending time in nature, or any activity that helps you listen inward. The more you build a relationship with your own inner voice, the less you will depend on external voices to tell you who you are. You can also cultivate a support system of people who respect your journey. Seek out friends, mentors, or communities who celebrate your authenticity. These relationships will remind you that you are not too much or too little. You are exactly as you are meant to be. And when you inevitably face moments of uncertainty or fear, remember that you have already done the hardest part. You decided to define yourself. That single choice, to claim ownership of your identity, is the foundation upon which everything else is built. No one gets to define you but you, not your family, not your peers, not your critics, not the voice in your head that echoes old doubts. Only you can decide who you are, what you value, and how you want to live. This is the gift and the responsibility of freedom, and you are more than capable of carrying it. When you reach the point where you truly understand that no one has the right to define you but you, something profound shifts. You begin to look at your life through an entirely different lens. What once seemed non-negotiable, the expectations, the labels, the assumptions, now look small and even absurd. You see clearly how much of your energy has been drained by trying to prove yourself to people whose opinions were never yours to carry. You feel the weight of years spent seeking permission to simply exist as you are, and for the first time you allow yourself to consider, what would my life look like if I stopped apologizing for being myself? This is not a rhetorical question, it is an invitation. An invitation to build a life that reflects your deepest values and desires rather than the projections and fears of others. This stage of your journey is about embodiment. It's about bringing the truth you have claimed into every area of your existence, your work, your relationships, your habits, your dreams. You will notice quickly that this is not a passive process. It requires intention, courage, and commitment. The world is set up to reward conformity and punish difference. Systems are designed to keep you in your place, to make you doubt your worth, to convince you that being average is safer than being authentic. So you must be vigilant. You must be willing to stand in your own light even when it draws criticism or envy. Here is the paradox. The more you live in alignment with your truth, the less you need external validation, yet the more resistance you might face from those who are still imprisoned by their own fear. People who have never dared to define themselves will often feel threatened by your freedom. They will interpret your clarity as arrogance, your boundaries as rejection, your independence as rebellion. And in a way they are right. You are rebelling against the smallness you were taught to accept. This is why one of the most important skills you will develop is discernment. Discernment is the ability to know whose feedback is worth considering and whose is just noise. Not everyone deserves access to your heart. Not everyone has earned the right to influence your decisions. When you let anyone's opinion shape your identity, you hand them power that belongs to you alone. So, be intentional about whose voices you invite into your life. Along the way, you will also have to face your own internal resistance. It's one thing to intellectually understand that you are the author of your story. It's another to act on that understanding every single day. Old habits die hard. You may find yourself slipping into people-pleasing, self-sabotage, or perfectionism without even realizing it. When that happens, don't condemn yourself. Simply notice it and come back to your center. You are not failing. You are practicing. And practice, over time, becomes identity. The more you choose to honor your truth in small moments, saying no when you mean no, expressing an unpopular opinion, taking a risk that feels aligned, the stronger your self-trust becomes. You realize that the world does not collapse when you stop pretending. In fact, your life expands in ways you never imagined. One of the most beautiful parts of this journey is discovering what truly matters to you. When you stop living for approval, you get to ask honest questions. What lights me up? What do I find meaningful? What kind of relationships nourish me? What do I want to contribute to the world? These questions will guide you toward a life that feels purposeful rather than performative. You might realize that you want to change careers, or move to a different place, or start a creative project you've been avoiding. You might discover that some of your relationships no longer fit the person you are becoming. This can be painful, but it is also liberating, because once you know who you are, you stop settling for anything that insults your soul. Another critical part of this phase is learning how to hold your ground when you encounter pushback. It will happen. People will project their insecurities onto you. They will question your motives, criticize your choices, and sometimes even try to guilt you into shrinking back to the version of yourself they were more comfortable with. You must remember, their discomfort is not your responsibility. Their confusion is not your problem to solve. You can have compassion for their perspective without internalizing it as truth. You are not obligated to make yourself smaller so others can feel safe. This is the point where many people turn back. The pressure to conform can feel overwhelming, but you have a choice. You can abandon yourself again, or you can stay loyal to your own becoming. Loyalty to self is the highest form of integrity. It is the commitment to honor your own needs and values even when it's inconvenient or unpopular. It is the courage to be misunderstood. It is the quiet strength of knowing that your worth is not negotiable. As you continue to walk this path, you will find that you are no longer available for relationships that require you to betray yourself. You will no longer tolerate situations that drain your energy and compromise your peace. You will no longer pretend to be someone you're not just to earn validation you don't need. And in that space of radical self-ownership, something extraordinary happens. You attract people and opportunities that align with your true nature. You become a magnet for authenticity. You inspire others to do the same. Because when you live as the most honest version of yourself, you give others silent permission to question their own limitations. You become a living example of what it looks like to define your own worth, to write your own story, to stand in your own power. Of course, there will still be moments of doubt and fear. There will still be days when the old voices get loud again, whispering that you are too much or not enough. That is normal. It does not mean you are going backward. It simply means you are human. In those moments, come back to this truth. No one gets to define you but you. Not your critics, not your past, not your circumstances. Only you hold the pen that writes the narrative of your life. So keep writing, keep choosing, keep becoming. Because you are not here to be a watered-down version of yourself. You are here to live fully, honestly, unapologetically. And no one, not a single person on this planet, has the right to take that away from you.